Hi, everybody. I'm Diane Brady. I am here with Rahul Roy Chowdhury, who is, of course, the new CEO of Grammarly. Good to see you.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me, Diane.
Of course. I want to start actually with one of the funniest headlines I've read in a long time, which is Grammarly gets new AI tool, replaces CEO, which makes me want to start with saying, please prove you're human, sir. That was not a Forbes headline, but I guess the packaging of it, you were the former head of product at Grammarly, so you are the person behind this new AI tool.
Yeah.
Let's start
Yes.
with that.
Yeah. Can I just say, first of all, I am real. I'm not sure how to
Well, it's
prove that to you, but I am very much human, flesh and blood.
not a deep
And that
fake,
headline, I think, is a good example of, hey, communicating effectively matters. And
right?
so you want to make sure you can get your point across in the way you intend. And that's what we do as our product.
Well, then let me rephrase it because you just came in on May 1st, and so you're new into the job. What
Yeah.
attracted you to this role? I mean, we assume everybody wants to be a CEO, but not necessarily. What opportunity did you see for yourself in this?
Yeah, I joined Grammarly just over 2 years
Yeah.
ago, and I joined Grammarly to lead the product team. The reason I came to Grammarly was just a deep belief in the mission of what we're doing here. Our mission as a company is to improve lives by improving communication. That is a thing that I want to work on. That's a thing that I think should exist in the world. And I deeply believe in our ability to make people communicate more effectively, make them show up in the way they'd like to show up, get their point across in the way they want to get their point across. And so I want to work on this mission. And that's why I joined Grammarly. 2 years in, I am so optimistic about our opportunity ahead to really scale our product, to help more people in more places with more types of communication than ever before. So when the opportunity came along to be CEO, it's not that I'm looking to be CEO of something, but I just deeply care about Grammarly and
Mm-hmm.
making Grammarly successful in whatever capacity that I can do it.
Well,
So I'm in this role. I'm very honored to be in this role, and I'm super excited.
well, okay, you're 2 weeks in. We'll catch you in 2 years. No, I'm kidding. But
Yeah.
well, uh, I wanted one of the interesting things about generative AI, which I know is at the heart of this new Grammarly Go product, is I think of Grammarly as an assistive AI tool. Does it now become a preparatory tool as well? I mean, that's really where people are starting to get nervous as to what extent it
Yeah.
takes over the function as opposed to helps you do the function.
Yeah, that's a really good question, Diane. So let me give you a little bit of context to kind of tell you the arc of Grammarly.
Mm-hmm.
We started out, our mission is to improve lives by improving communication. We started out helping people just with basics of correctness, grammar, spelling, tense, things like that. And that's where the name came from. But then over the years, we realized that we can actually help people and achieve our mission by looking at communication more broadly. And we've been building over the last several years things beyond correctness, things like tone, brevity, clarity, to just really encompass this communication challenge. And now with the advent of generative AI, what's really exciting is we can now help with more of the entire life cycle of communication. You can think of this as, we go through these stages, whether explicit or implicit, we kind of go through this process.
Yeah.
There's a conception phase, like what do I want to say? There's a composition phase. I write down what I want to say. There's a revision phase. I keep going back and forth, making it better. And then because there's another person or group of people involved, there's a comprehension phase at the other side. Did I understand what the point was? And then, the whole cycle starts again. And so you can think of Grammarly Go as really expanding the benefit that Grammarly provides from the revision phase of helping you communicate more effectively to all these other phases of communicating more effectively. So it's really part of our journey and part of our mission. And so this is very much aligned with what we're trying to do as a company, and generative AI and all the really amazing things happening. By the way, I've been working in AI for a long time, and
Yeah, you came
let me
from
just say,
Google 14
exciting
years.
times.
Well, I guess what interests me, let's start with generative AI, which almost
Yeah.
like Kleenex versus tissue paper, people use the word ChatGPT almost as a substitute now for generative AI. To what extent do you develop these tools through your own, homegrown technology versus using these, innovative leaps we've seen with partners?
Well, we do all of the above. our approach always has been, we're not here to take a piece of technology and try to find uses for it. We try to find a user problem that we think we can uniquely solve, and then we find the best technical ways to solve that problem. So in the early days of Grammarly, for example, it was using something we call NLP, natural language processing.
Yep.
Then deep learning came along with ML, and we started incorporating ML. And what we found was, actually, it's not either or. ML works better when incorporated with the NLP expertise we already had. So it layers on. And now with generative AI, we're doing the same thing. It's a new piece of technology that enables us to solve a user problem that we care deeply about. So it's just getting layered onto the things we've done before. And it's not just let's throw out this thing and bring this other thing in. It's more, let's bring in a whole portfolio of technical solutions to solve this user problem.
So you would be working with a partner. OpenAI would be a partner, one of the partners you'd work with in putting together this suite of products. I mean, I just want to clarify.
Yeah. So in terms of specifics, we have several ML and AI pipelines that we have built ourselves in-house.
Mm-hmm.
With Grammarly Go, we've also added to it the GPT 3.5 model running on Azure. So it's not OpenAI, it's running on Azure, but it's a GPT underlying model. So we've added that to our existing ML pipelines to bring Grammarly Go to our users.
Well, one of the things that intrigues me, especially, as a leader yourself, to what extent, I always think of that disrupt or be disrupted, and it feels like we're at such a new phase of innovation here that if I were in your seat, in addition to having tools to ramp up the effectiveness of your product, you also are facing competition for that product because you have many others that can now come and claim to do the same thing. How do you deal with that?
I deal with it by doing something I've always done throughout my career, which is I focus on helping users solve problems that we think we can uniquely solve. The minute I start looking at what other people are doing or look at novelty or change, I lose focus on what really matters, which is helping users. So I've always used this throughout my career. At Grammarly, we are laser focused on helping users solve their problems. And if there's innovation in the space, I feel like that's great. That's a good thing for users because we'll provide better services to our users. And I'm just going to stay focused on.
That's fair. I think that's very fair. Do you have advice to other leaders with regard to, whether you partner or develop something in-house? Because I think that, again, I speak to a lot of CEOs who are very excited about the potential of generative AI. They are not a company like yours where they are essentially building these from the ground up in many cases.
Yeah.
Would you be proceeding with enthusiasm, caution, or both?
Yeah, it's if I were to give advice to folks in the space, I would say a couple of things. The first thing I would say is really do stay focused on users, because it seems like an obvious kind of almost trite thing to say, but it's easy to get caught up in the hype cycle of, oh my goodness, look at all these other things happening and I got to get in there and do something. But if you don't remember your users and the problem you're solving for your users, you get taken off track. So really force yourself, even if it's uncomfortable, to go back to solving user problems. And then the other thing I will say is AI is a very powerful piece of technology, probably the most powerful technological force shaping our world today. And we as leaders in the space have a responsibility to bring this to our users in a safe, responsible way that doesn't increase bias, that doesn't increase risk, and that really keeps users at the center of the experience. And that's very much front and center for me and for us at Grammarly.
So what are you doing about that
forward to our users?
Can you be more specific about, I think everybody says they want to have ethical use of AI. What specifically do you think you're doing to address that? I'm not putting you on the spot here, but I am genuinely curious how one does that.
Yeah, I will. I had this whole session that I did at South by Southwest to talk about very practical ways in which we deploy our products. We use something that we call the TRUE framework. I won't go into all the details of it, but just very high level. T stands for trust, which is about making sure that you have safety precautions in place, you have privacy guarantees in place. The R stands for responsibility, which is to make sure you have quality and bias mitigation efforts in place. So when you're looking at a model, you have a way of evaluating the quality of the model, evaluating bias, sensitive text, etc. The U stands for user control. We want to make sure that users don't feel like this technology is just being done to them or happening to them. They have control over the experience. And that's not something that happens by accident. That requires intention that reflects the design choices we make. And the E stands for empathy, which is the thing I mentioned earlier. Let's focus on solving a real user problem and not just throw technology over the wall and hope for the
see
best.
what sticks.
So that's the true framework. And there's more detail behind it, but it's very actionable, very practical. And I really would love to see no secrets here. This is not a Grammarly proprietary thing. If more people can use the true framework and get value from it, I'm really happy to see it.
Well, you didn't start, you were at Lazard, but you did spend time at Amazon. And one of the things that intrigues me about machine learning is we're in essence training the machine to do a lot of the things that we do well. And I'll give you the analogy. You tell me if it's fair, but using some of these tools, you can potentially train those tools, in essence, to do what you do better. And I'm thinking of the Amazon example of I sell a popular tent. Amazon can see that data and said, you know what? We're going to make a cheaper, better version of that tent and put it on our platform and essentially compete with you, our partner. How big a risk is that, you think, when the information that we're feeding into these tools is using that to make the tool itself better?
I think with any powerful technology, there's a lot of benefit, but there is risk, which is why I think it's really important for us as leaders to be very deliberate and intentional about how we deploy these technologies at scale.
Yeah.
What I see, for example, is I kind of see this somewhat bifurcated response. One of them is, hey, let's just move forward, full steam ahead, and hope for the best. Well, that's not great. Actually, there is risk, and you shouldn't just hope for the best. Hope is not a good strategy.
Yeah.
And on the other extreme, I see, well, it's super scary. Let's just not do anything. And that's not great either, because there's real benefit. So really, we as leaders and as an industry have to figure out the responsible, intentional path forward, because we have the control. As leaders, as users of this technology, we can decide how it moves forward. There's no kind of a priori right of this technology to kind of upend our world and our lives and kind of displace our own capabilities. I want technology to augment us, not displace us.
There were some recent hearings, of course, in Congress, and we heard, OpenAI Sam Altman talk about the need for regulation. What do you think yourself in terms of what the right balance is? What's missing that we need?
I think the conversation is missing. So I care deeply about this. I don't see this being in every single conversation, in every single deployment of products that use AI, and it should be. So I'm happy that the conversation is happening, whether it's through legislative action, whether it's through CEOs testifying in front of Congress. It's an important conversation. AI is very powerful, and let's make sure we take responsibility for deploying this well. That's something that I welcome, because I care deeply about this personally, and I think we care deeply about this at Grammarly. And it's not just talk. This is how we build our products.
When you say you welcome
using this true framework.
So you welcome the conversation, or you welcome legislation? Obviously, it's hard. The devil's in the details, right? I do think about that Reagan quote, "I'm from the government and I'm here to help," and that's usually not a good thing necessarily for innovation. But from where you stand, do you think that the legislation really needs to be in place to achieve what you talk about with the trust, the empathy, et cetera?
I think legislation for such an important area is needed and helpful, and I welcome the conversation. I welcome this happening. I think that's great. Independent of legislation, though, I think we as leaders need to take our responsibility seriously. If I'm doing everything right, then we're already way ahead of the legislation, and when legislation comes, it just reflects what we have already known to be true and already incorporate in our business practices.
Now, Grammarly is a leader in this space, and I know you've been at Google, which of course became, I think about Alphabet and how Google split up. One of the questions right now is, when you have particular companies that are so dominant in such a powerful technology of generative AI, are we going to create kind of a new group of behemoths? And we've seen that the public doesn't like when there's too many tech titans with too much power. How big a risk do you think that is right now? Because really you can accelerate innovation at such a great pace with the tools we now have.
I think that is always a risk in technology. I think that's been true for decades in technology, but technology always finds a path forward. And the innovation that I'm seeing is not restricted to a few companies or a few behemoths. It is pretty widespread across the entire industry. I mean, I've been working in tech for a long time, and this current period of excitement and the pace of change is just so energizing. It's unbelievable. The pace at which things are happening and changing is great. And so that's a wonderful thing. I think this speaks to how vibrant the technology ecosystem is, and it's very widespread. I don't think it's just restricted to a few places.
It will be interesting to see the impact on jobs. So, because I know that BT announced earlier this week, I believe, that it's planning to cut 55,000 jobs by 2030. Many of those jobs will be replaced by AI. So that is a reality that many companies are facing. Is that something you see either within Grammarly or the customers that you work with, since you do have enterprise customers?
That's not something we've seen. I think everyone is trying to assess how generative AI, keep in mind generative AI and the implications of generative AI. This is very, very new. 6 months ago, no one would have known what an LLM stood for.
Right.
Maybe a master's degree in law or something. But it's now 6 months later, the world has changed. So
now
it's very,
now
very
it's like,
new.
who needs lawyers? We've got the machine. Yep.
What does this mean for us? What does this mean for the workflows? What does this mean for how we get work done? At this event we did on Tuesday, one of the things I shared was, here's a way to think about the problem. We as knowledge workers in the US, on average, we spend more than half our work week engaged in written communication. And over the last 12 months, the time we spend in written communication has gone up by 18%.
Yep.
But the effectiveness of that communication has gone down by 12%. So doing more faster is not a solution. Actually, it's going to make it worse. So the answer is not, let's just get on this treadmill and run faster and somehow outrun this thing. The answer is not more, but better. And so if we can use Grammarly or other tools, I mean, this is, I'm sharing it from Grammarly's perspective,
right.
But really the problem is, I'm spending so much time in written communication. How can I do it better, more effectively, so that if I'm sending an email to you, let's say, I can find exactly the right words to use to get my point across so you understand what I'm saying, as opposed to like the 20 email exchange where I send something and you're like, well, what does that mean? I don't know. I don't understand what that means. And we go back and forth, and 20 emails later, we're like, okay, finally, we got it. Wow. That's what the ineffective communication does. And that's what we're here to solve.
I agree. I agree. Let me pivot a little bit, if you don't mind. I'm intrigued by the fact that you were the global head of product. And from a perspective of the route to the CEO role, that's an unusual route, especially if you're not the chief product officer who's also a founder of the company. That leap, I know we're weeks into the job, but you were announced several weeks ago.
Yep.
Do you think it's good preparation for this particular role to be a chief product officer? Because often it's the CFO that's picked or some other role.
Well, I think every situation is different. I don't think there's any blueprint that applies everywhere. In this case, for me personally, I deeply care about Grammarly and making it successful. So anything I can do to further that mission, I'm in. So I was in. In terms of my preparation and my background, I've been working on AI for a long time.
Yeah.
In fact, it's kind of a full circle moment because a long time ago, I was at Columbia University doing a PhD. I didn't finish, I dropped out, but I was doing a PhD in AI. And now many years later, I'm back in New York. I think this amazing AI moment. So I care deeply about AI. I've been thinking about AI my entire career. I worked at Google and other places at pretty large scale. And so I've seen kind of scaled teams and enterprises and organizations. And so I can bring some of that to bear. But the reality is Grammarly is different. It's unique. It's not about just saying, here's how I'm going to do things. It's about recognizing what Grammarly needs and then, making sure that we can build the best company we want to build to help our users.
Yeah, it's been interesting. I don't know if you've been following the academic conversation around AI. I'm from Canada, and I know that Canada Toronto, Montreal in particular have become very vibrant centers of AI, and the conversations, around sort of the implications there. One thing I want to mention is, was Grammarly not started? I think maybe Grammarly was actually started by Canadian citizens, but in Kyiv, Grammarly has been one of the companies that suspended service in Russia. This could be a very protracted conflict. What's the plans there?
We've had deep roots in Ukraine and Kyiv from the beginning of the company. We have employees still in Ukraine, and our first and foremost, our goal is to make sure that we are there to help and support all of our colleagues who are going through a very difficult time. This is an ongoing situation. We still have people in Ukraine, and so I don't want to share too many details of it, but I just want you and your viewers to know that we are very much supporters of Ukraine. Ukraine is very much part of our company ethos and culture, and we're here first and foremost to support our employees, our colleagues, but also to just demonstrate our support for Ukraine and the situation that the Ukrainian people are in.
What about the suspension of services in Russia, though? I mean,
yeah, we decided to suspend access to Grammarly from Russia and Belarus, and the reason is because we felt we have employees, our Grammarly employees, actively in harm's way as a result of actions in those two countries. So that's what we took this step towards. It's really a signal of support to our employees.
Would it be something that continues until the conflict ends? Because this could be a multi-year conflict. I mean, I guess it's a bold decision as well to suspend services based on political conflicts. You're a new CEO. Well, just curious your views on it.
It didn't seem that complicated to me. Actually, it's quite an easy decision. I was actually head of product when we made that decision, and it seemed like a very obvious decision for me to make. At the end of the day, we as a team care deeply about working together well, having a very strong culture of collaboration. And that's the most important thing. But we're trying to do this very big, bold thing in this world to achieve our mission. The way we do that is to have a very strong, cohesive, aligned team of people aligned on that mission. And so we want to make sure that no matter what we do as a company, we stay aligned and focused and cohesive. And anything I can do to make sure we reinforce that, I'm going to do that.
So if I'm a former Russian customer of Grammarly, should I not expect to get access to it again until the war's over? I mean, is that fair to say? If I'm watching this,
say, yeah.
I think that's fair. You've been very generous with your time. I want to ask you what's on your radar that you would be putting on ours in terms of what excites you looking ahead. I know we've talked a bit about Grammarly Go, but just in general, the economic climate. Tell us how you think the conditions are for just growing the business in general.
Well, there's some uncertainty, certainly, economic uncertainty around generative AI and what it means. But overall, I see a ton of opportunity. I'm very optimistic about the future. And the one thing I'll kind of share with you what's on my mind is it's funny, actually, Grammarly has been around for over a decade.
Yep, 14
Grammarly
years,
has been an enterprise company since before we were an enterprise company, if that makes any sense, because people have been using Grammarly in the workplace for a long time. But over the last few years, we've really started focusing on helping businesses drive impact and value and improve communications at the enterprise level. And so I think there's a huge amount of potential and opportunity for Grammarly to help businesses navigate this changing world of AI and AI enable your business and communicate more effectively with Grammarly. That's the thing I mentioned earlier. We spend so much of our time in written communication. The answer is not more, the answer is better. And with Grammarly for Business, you can actually do it better. And so I think that's a very big area of us, and I think for us to focus on. It's a big opportunity that I see ahead, and it's certainly something I'm going to be spending a lot of time on.
Great. Well, thank you for joining us, and I look forward to continuing the conversation.
Thank you, Diane. It was great to chat with you.
Thank you. Cheers.